We're here with Jim. Jim, thank you for coming out. Jim is a veteran from the 101st Airborne.
That's correct.
And so how long did you serve?
I served in Vietnam from 69 to 70, and I was there for a year, actually 11 months and 10 days. So I got an early out from President Nixon at the time.
Oh,
so
that's good.
I came home
that's
after
awesome.
That. But yeah.
That's great.
I was a draftee, and when I was drafted, they said count out in threes, and every third guy was a Marine to be a number 2, so I came to the Army.
Where'd you do basic training at?
Fort Bliss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about your vehicle here.
Well, this Jeep I bought probably 4 years ago from a friend of mine who was getting elderly. He was in his 90s, and he said, I know you'll restore it. He had bought it when it was decommissioned in 1955. And it's been just a really a kind of a fun little project. He had, whenever he bought it, the thing you did in 1955 was you took off the military stuff and you put on stuff that was non-military. You drove it out in the desert and you drove it around. So he'd put a bench seat in it and a bunch of 14-inch wheels on it with desert tires.
So at one time people were modifying them and making them look less military for whatever purposes they were using them for. And now it's come full circle, right? Everybody wants to make it as original as possible. Now, so this is a Ford.
It's a Ford, but it went down, it's actually what they call a Wilford. It's half Willys and half Ford. It went down the Ford assembly line on a Willys frame. In 1942, before Ford was making their own frames, a company called A.O. Smith made the frames, and that's who Willys was using. And they went down, it went down the Ford assembly line on an A.O. Smith frame. But Ford marked everything they could on there so they would. They said it was for warranty purposes. Some people think it was primarily for advertising. The seats, it's got the little Ford on it, and in various areas that you take off underneath the hood, you'll have the little Ford emblem behind it on the firewall.
Now tell us about the hood, because it's branded Willys.
Yes, and that's not the original hood. The original hood that my friend got it with had a big depression in the center of it. And so he decided, since he was working for Disneyland and was a friend of Walt Disney's, that he would buy Walt's Jeep that they built Disneyland with whenever it became available after Disneyland was built. And he was working there in '55. So that Jeep had been through the mill building Disneyland. It was pretty well trashed. And so it was a CJ2A. And so he took the hood off of Walt's Jeep because it was better than the one he had after he bought Walt's Jeep. And then he put his hood on Walt's Jeep and sold it off.
Wow, a connection to Walt Disney.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
And this, originally when I got it, he had left the hood blue. It had the Disneyland blue on it, on the hood, and I decided I would go ahead and paint it the same as the rest of the military stuff. But that's one of the things that's not authentic on it.
All right, Jim, tell us about the bumper.
Well, this bumper looks a little different because it has tow bar racks on it. So my buddy put it on there so he could tow it out to the desert. And I was constantly banging my knee on the thing, so I put these things on, which are, if you recognize them, they actually go on ladders that you'd put on top of a house to keep from scratching the stucco or paint or whatever. So, but they work well for me.
Jim, tell us about these lights, these blackout lights.
Well, these are blackout lights that you would use at night so you wouldn't get spotted by the enemy. And they come on, these lights don't come on, these come on separately. And if you were in a convoy, I understand that you would use this one. So you would have not just those two, but you'd have this. And they illuminate fairly well. The ones we had in Vietnam worked very well on the M1A1s. And so they just illuminate enough light where you wouldn't get seen from very far away, but you could see the road a little bit.
Now, what is this light right here?
That's a siren.
Oh, that's a siren?
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
That's a siren.
Oh. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, 6-volt stuff.
And so what about the engine? Is it the original engine?
That's the original engine. I got it, it had a bent valve. He had left it apart he couldn't remember why he tore it apart, but it had been apart in his garage since 1970. And I couldn't see it when I bought it because it had boxes and stuff all over it. And so after we unloaded it, I found the radiator off to the side, and there was a saddle in the back of it he didn't know he had, and a bunch of unusual stuff in there, along with a bunch of mice and rats. And so he had had the radiator off, and mice had gotten in the engine and made a nest, and then rats or mice won, and they'd also gotten in the head, and they'd also gotten in the radiator. So I had 3 different nests of mice and rats in there that I had to deal with. But we got them all out and got it all put back together. And let me raise the hood and I'll show you what that looks like.
It has the same type of latches basically that are on the CJ.
Yes. Originally these latches that were on there were 4 of them on this. But with this hood, there's only 2.
With the Willys hood?
The Willys hood, yeah.
And the bumper looks a lot like the CJ7 bumper as well.
I don't think there was a lot of difference. And this little motor is what they call the Go Devil motor. And it's, it would have been painted green originally. This developed 90 horsepower, which was really good weight to power for the time. And you know, I think a Ford Flathead had 80 horsepower, 60 horsepower originally, and then I think some of them had 90. But you know, 90 horsepower of a little 4-cylinder motor was quite good.
All right, Jim, show me the kind of neat trick there where they designed it where the headlight turns around so you could work on the engine at night.
Well, this, you would unscrew a little wing nut here, slide this off to the side, and the headlight comes up like so, and you could move it around to work on the motor. I've got this tightened down right now, but it has a separate grounding strap just so it works that way.
That's a neat little nifty.
It's a very neat little,
Yeah.
I'm surprised that they didn't continue that with civilian vehicles.
Yeah. What I read is that Bantam came in within the specified amount of time that they had to do it, which was under 60 days.
Right.
And they submitted those blueprints, and then those were given to Ford and Willys, and this engine, the Go Devil, was the superior engine.
Correct.
And so that's what they wanted to go with. And then ultimately, Bantam ended up making trailers.
Correct.
For the
yeah.
military.
Yeah, Bantam, they were better suited for trailers. They didn't have a large facility like Ford, and Willys had a fairly large facility too. Willys made the lion's share of the Jeeps. It came in at 360,000 or so, and then Ford made 70,000 or something along that line.
And so I see that little oil.
Yeah, this oil can was used to oil the generator and the starter, and you just flip it over and turn it over. It had an original clip here. This isn't it. Mine's held on with magnets, and that's not an original can, but one of these days I'll get the original one. There's several things that aren't original to the Jeep. One of them is this little black handle here. That should just be a little T-strap. You know, and this hood is not original, so it would have had grounding straps all around on it. That's just what they did. The grounding straps everywhere, as you can see here and here. The grounds were so important on the 6-volt systems.
So here is one of the places that Ford branded it with an F. So you said 90 horsepower?
90 horsepower, and it's a 3-speed H pattern, and it's pretty easy to drive. Nothing really complicated about it. It's got little lights where you can pull these out, and they'll light underneath so you can see what the gauges look like. Got a flashlight carrier there. They had an eye hook, a little like that eye hook over there, that all of them came with, and it was right here, and it came out so you could run a padlock right there so nobody could steal it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty simple system.
And you have a 3-speed manual transmission, and then the gear shifters on the right.
In and out and high and low. That's what they are.
Okay.
One is in and out, and one is high and low.
In and out of 4-wheel drive.
Right, in and out of 4-wheel drive.
And then the one to the right
high
is low
and low.
high.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that I've had the CJ7 for 30-something years, and getting that engaged in 4-wheel drive, particularly in low, is incredibly difficult. How about this one?
Yeah. No, it's not hard to engage it in low. It actually, these were made to be very simple because they knew they were going to have a lot of drivers that didn't have any experience in driving them. And so they wanted it to be as simple as it could. I think the later Jeeps got more and more complex, and of course today, computerized and all that stuff, but these were very, very basic. And they wanted the gas tank to carry quite a bit of gas, and so they made it drop down in the footwell. Drops all the way down in the footwell there, so it's a fairly big gas tank. I had to replace the gas tank on this one.
Do you have any idea on the factory gas tank how many gallons it was?
I think it was, well, that is the factory gas tank, but it's a repop of it. And I think it's like 8 gallons, I believe, but it gets you fairly far on it. It might be 10 gallons. I don't recall exactly what it is. But it's to fill it up, you open this up and there's the filler.
Wow, right underneath your seat. That's comforting, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah. Have that right underneath your seat.
And do you have any idea if these are the original seats or the original type of seats?
These are the original type of seats. They aren't the original seats for this one. My friend had, once he became a little bit elderly and a little incapacitated, his wife sold off a lot of the stuff that he had, and he had his original seats that she just threw away. So he had a bench seat in here out of a Corvair when I got it, so he could take his grandkids along riding with him in the desert.
So you have a shovel and an axe over here. When they came and they delivered them to the service, did they already have an axe and a shovel, or was that something that was put on aftermarket?
That's a really good question. I'm not really sure. I saw him coming off the assembly line without the axe and shovel, but that might have been put on later. I would bet it probably was put on in the different areas, because they may not have wanted that shovel and axe if they weren't doing things in the field. If they were an administrative vehicle or a general's vehicle, he would want an axe and a shovel on there probably.
And what size tires are these?
These are 16s, I'm sorry. And these are not the original combat wheels. The original combat wheels had bolts all the way around them, and that was to hold like an inner piece, like a flange, and they would come apart, the wheels would come apart, and they were called run flat wheels. So you could actually drive on a flat. The tire wouldn't go completely collapse, which made them very good for combat, because they were driving these things everywhere. And they said, I think it was 8 GIs could pick one of these up.
Eight GIs could pick the whole Jeep up?
8 GIs could pick it up, because it's only a quarter ton. And so if you get it, that's why they had all these handles on here where people could grab it and they could pick it up with all these different things. So it made it much easier to transport them.
So that's a 5-gallon gas tank there?
Yes, this is a 5-gallon gas tank, and this is what they call a pitial hitch, which is unique to the military. As it pulls up, the pin pulls up and you can drop a yoke in there.
And these little bumpers,
yep, those are
pretty much the same thing that you've got on the CJ. I mean, they haven't changed at all.
They didn't evolve much from the bumpers, and they were the 5-mile-an-hour bumper of the time.
Wow. Jim, I know you use the Jeep in a lot of events and parades and things, and you belong to a military organization, right?
Yes, the Southern California Military Vehicle Collectors Club. And it's a great club. They put on a lot of events. The AAA club event is an employees event, but they always have this big group out, and incredible vehicles that the military made.
And you don't have to be in the military to join the club, right?
No, you don't have to be in the military, and
you don't have to have
a vehicle.
A military vehicle either, right?
No, but they have a fabulous newsletter. They put out, like I said, really good events, and everybody's invited.
So Jim, and of course I'm biased because I've had a Jeep for over 30 years and I love Jeeps, but I can't think of another vehicle that's played a bigger role in American history. I mean, you have the Model T, and it was, something in production for a short period of time, but something that was involved in the war effort. And really, from what I've read, not only General Eisenhower, but other generals have talked about the Jeep as a major contributor to the victory of the war even.
That's correct.
Which seems, just crazy. But before this all-purpose kind of vehicle that they had, they used horses, right?
They did, and Ford made a lot of military vehicles. I mean, they made airplanes. Ford was one of the first innovators on the airplane. So, and they made the military vehicles, but Willys trademarked the name Jeep.
So, I mean, it had an incredibly significant role in American history, and it's still made today. And you look at the CJ7 and the CJ5 before that, I mean, they looked a lot like this vehicle.
Yes, they didn't deviate that far.
And we won't do a deep dive into this today. I was just telling you that I'm probably going to do a video on this at some point, but there's multiple theories as to where the name came from. One was the acronym.
Exactly.
And what was that acronym?
Well, the acronym was GP for General Purpose. And that turned into GP was easily extracted into Jeep, and just by the pronunciation, GP, Jeep.
And I guess there are really two other major competing theories as to where the Jeep name came from, and one is Popeye, which was hugely popular at that time. You're talking about before people were watching television.
That's true.
And Popeye was huge, and the character in Popeye was Eugene Jeep.
Yes.
And he was known to be kind of a mythical person who could
Universal
get anywhere,
character. Exactly,
do
yeah.
anything.
Kind of the MacGyver of the time.
And then the other theory is that, and this has been documented going all the way back to the First World War, that people in military service would use the word Jeep when they referred to any kind of new equipment. And it was even used to refer to aircraft.
Yeah.
And that was long before the Jeep came along.
Correct.
Well, regardless of where the name came from, the Jeep is a pretty amazing vehicle and really did make an amazing contribution to the war effort during World War II and beyond, right? I mean, until they started using the Humvee.
Exactly. Into the civilian era, you know, it popped in, and it's been taken on very eagerly by all people.
Jim, thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. I know on behalf of all the viewers, we really want to thank you for your service. And I hope that we can, I know you've got a lot more stuff. You've got military motorcycles, mini bikes, and all kinds of things. So I hope to get together with you again. Good. And show off some of the amazing stuff you have.
I look forward to it. That'll be fun.
Thank you, Jim.